So today I'm delighted to say that I have Nina de Roo from Wageningen University in the Netherlands. And she's going to be speaking to me about her recent paper that was published earlier this year in the Journal of Science Communication called University-Led Dialogues with Society, Balancing, Informing and Listening. Can you talk to me a bit about what these dialogues look like, who's there, what kind of topics are being discussed?
Yeah, increasingly universities are eager to engage in good conversations with societal members of society. So rather than speaking about debates, they speak about dialogue these days. And the idea of dialogue is that you actually converse with each other on equal footage. So the scientist is not necessarily the one who knows it all, but is also supposed to listen to citizens, government agencies, and other members, companies, other actors in society. So the university where I work, for example, Wageningen University, they actually set up a dialogue center, and they organize dialogues with all kind of actors actually, and mostly it's around topics that are kind of controversial, or at least where there's kind of very different ideas floating around in society about what direction we should take as a society. For example, the future of agriculture, the role of livestock in the food system, the use of pesticides, the role of gene editing, CRISPR-Cas, for example.
And so the idea is that researchers would be one of the parties present at these dialogues. In your paper, you've broken down researchers into kind of categorize them in different groups, like the pure scientist and so on. There are 5 different groups. I was wondering if you could talk me through those, starting with, I think the first one is that the pure scientist.
The pure scientist is not so much interested in what happens with the results of his or her results. He or she's just doing his research, finding out things, writing them up in papers, get them peer-reviewed and get them out there. But you wouldn't find probably a pure scientist in a dialogue, because he's not really interested to engage with the public about what he or she has found. He leaves that to others, to maybe science communicators or others. So that's the pure scientist. And the pure scientist, by the way, sees him or herself as a neutral, objective, an impartial scientist who is just purely trying to find out the facts. So the science arbiter is actually trying to identify what we know about the topic, what we don't know, and what kind of falsehoods there may be there. So like a fact checker, more or less. So the issue advocate is actually picking a side. So let's imagine, for example, you do research about animals, and you really are convinced that the way to go is veganism. So we shouldn't eat animals, we shouldn't exploit animals. So if you're an issue advocate, you pick a side, and for example, that can be an NGO asking you to help you out, to find all the facts supporting the claim for veganism. So you'll do your research, and you'll be helping that organization in doing that research. And this role really comes with a responsibility, because as a researcher, normally you're supposed to be independent, of course. But if you are explicit about your position and about the limitations of your own expertise, so you say that in my expertise, in biology, for example, or in sociology, these and these are the facts that support this claim. So you have to be explicit and transparent about picking a side, and also the limitations of your own expertise. Then this role is also legitimate, actually. So the honest broker is slightly different from the other 3 roles in that regard, because he will not reduce the options for policymakers, so what they should be doing with the facts, but he will only expand the options. So an honest broker is really trying to give the whole menu of available knowledge. Also, which knowledge is contested, which knowledge is lacking, but he or she will provide the overview of the available knowledge, and not make any inference about what policymakers should be doing with that knowledge. So the knowledge co-creator is more of an action researcher who, together with actors in society, could be NGOs, companies, or citizens, or other governments, is co-creating new knowledge. So he or she's not presenting the available knowledge, but actually engaging in action research, and as a researcher contributing to identifying new knowledge. So it's a rather different role again than the other four.
And so when it came to studying the dialogue events that had taken place at your university, did these roles kind of hold true? Did they reflect the sort of the behavior, I suppose, or the attitudes of the researchers that were involved in those events?
So I spoke with many researchers, and most of them, they see themselves as the pure scientists, especially the ones who are engaged in more natural sciences, so physics or biology or soil science, for example. They really see themselves as the pure, independent, neutral or objective scientist. But actually, in fact, if you look at how they engage in dialogue and how the conversations in the dialogue take place, it becomes clear that in many cases, either the media or societal actors actually don't see researchers often as neutral. They often see them supporting one side of the story. And that can be dangerous also for the image of science, of course. So the case where I saw this most obviously was in a dialogue organized about CRISPR-Cas, which is basically a tool to do gene editing, where the scientists involved presented themselves as neutral, presenting the facts. But when I actually analyzed what happened during that dialogue, the positive sides of CRISPR-Cas were given way more attention than the possible risks, and especially the more structural risks about, for example, bigger companies gaining more power with these gene editing technologies, and some macroeconomic risks that some people see. They were not given a stage during this particular dialogue. So you saw really that they presented themselves as being neutral, objective, while they're being perceived by the audience as issue advocates. And that's what Robert Pielke calls stealth advocates. So they're actually presenting themselves as different as what they actually are. And I find that dangerous.
Right, because it potentially can kind of erode the trust that the public have in that institution or in science in general if they feel that they're being misled. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. That's the major risk. And in the end, because, I believe in the power of science and the power of research. But if we're not honest and transparent about how we do our research, it can harm our image and therefore also our contribution to finding solutions for the major problems that we're facing in this society.
Were there examples of dialogue events that were better examples of how it can be done in terms of who was there, how it was organized, and ultimately the impact that it had on those who attended and on the research as well, presumably, that comes off the back of it, because you want the research to be improved as a result of these dialogues as well?
I think in general, what I saw is when there was really a lot of attention in advance for having a diverse group of people that set the topic, that determined the topic, and also when not only scientists determine the topic, but also people in society can talk along about what should be the topic of the dialogue. In general, the quality of the dialogue is better because it is all those discussions that normally would take place in the dialogue have already been taking place beforehand. And so you really explored the topic with a very diverse group of people. So not only people who are in favor of a certain option or who only have a certain expertise. So you have this diversity of people and also of perspectives, scientific and non-scientific. And that makes the topic makes the discussions in the actual dialogue much better because you are prepared for that. And also you know who to invite. Because what I saw is that oftentimes there's a small group of people involved with similar expertise. And if they organize the dialogue, they only know what they know and they only know who they know. So the group of people who will be invited into the dialogue will also be limited. And actually one of the characteristics of a good dialogue is that you at least enable the group to explore all the different perspectives to the topic. So if you only invite a limited number of perspectives to the dialogue, you will exclude, maybe unintentionally, very interesting conversations.
One of the other things that was in your paper was about the importance of those who attend feeling comfortable, feeling safe to give their opinions. I suppose the one potential conflict, I guess, is if you do open up attendance to people with all sorts of different opinions. I know this is a hot topic at the moment in terms of, how careful we should be around sort of exposing people to different beliefs and so on, and is that a problem? But, I suppose perhaps in the cases where there's been a limited group of people invited, part of that was in order to not have fierce debates around things because the viewpoints are so opposed. Do you think sometimes people go for the safe option of choosing people who are likely to broadly agree on certain things but maybe disagree on some points? Or how can you create that sort of sense of comfortable, safe space, but also have people whose viewpoints might clash quite a lot when they come into the same room?
Well, personally, I believe a conversation is like a diamond. So you have to rub it for it to shine. And it also depends on the topic. So if you really only invite people who are more or less already agreeing, I wonder if you really will figure out something new. We need to have this diversity of people in the room. You need to have the system in the room. Otherwise, you will just continue doing the same things that you've been doing before. And of course, there's a lot of things that can be done with the moderation and the moderator and the methods that you use for the dialogue. There's books out there. It's a whole field of its own where you can identify the right methods for the right situation. And the most important thing, as you already noted, is that people feel safe. But you can feel safe and still disagree with each other. That happens all the time. I mean, even within your families, people fight. But if you moderate that well, it can be really liberating, actually, to find out that you both have an opinion, you disagree with each other, but at least you understand where the other person is coming from. And in that, you can maybe find out a way out of the topic, that whatever it is that you're discussing.
The final recommendation that you have at the end of the article is about clarifying roles for the organizations doing the dialogue. So perhaps you can elaborate a little bit on that.
So I think it is really important that as a university to think about, if you want to engage in a dialogue, to think about your own position in that particular topic. And if, for example, in the case of CRISPR-Cas, if Wageningen University really has a stake in advancing that technology, I think it would be wise to be transparent about that and not host a dialogue about that topic. Maybe you can contribute as a university or as an individual researcher to a dialogue organized by others. But if you have a stake in a specific technology or a topic, you will never be seen as an independent or neutral player in that field. So I think it's wise to withdraw from hosting, because as a host, you're supposed to give way to all the different opinions and viewpoints that are there. And you have to be able to actually do that.
Is there anything that you sort of learned or that you included that we haven't discussed yet that you think is an important point to draw out before we bring the conversation to a close?
Yeah, I was thinking when I was talking, it may come across as if I am not aware about power dynamics in research, especially the topics that I research. They're surrounded by heavy, quite strong power dynamics. And that may also play out in the dialogue. So I think it's really important to, even if it's not your own expertise, to find others who may know better about this topic of power dynamics, because you're always part of a power play in your research, and research or knowledge can also be politicized. And if you ignore the power dynamics of your research, it may come back to you as a boomerang. So I think it is wise to find those people in your organization or beyond that are better informed about these different power dynamics that are at play, so that you avoid the trap of getting them into your dialogue and not handling them well. Because if you don't handle them well, I think in the end the world will be worse off.